Someone wanted a show. The show starts now.
Nothing says welcome home, honey, quite like finding a used rubber in your bed at 3 a.m. But there it was, sticky and accusatory, pressed into my palm like the world's worst handshake when I reached over to kiss my sleeping wife goodnight. Lila wasn't there, of course, just her note on the nightstand. You forgot to return this to your boyfriend. My name is Jack Kingsley, and I used to be somebody. Not A-list somebody, mind you. More like the guy who played the wisecracking best friend on a sitcom that got canceled after 2 seasons. These days, I host the morning drive time show on WKRP-FM, population nobody gives a damn Massachusetts. It's a long fall from Hollywood, but at least the commute's shorter. I sat there in our renovated mid-century home, staring at that latex accusation, my brain cycling through the 5 stages of grief at warp speed. Denial lasted about 2 seconds. Anger kicked in when I noticed Lila's pillow was bone dry. No mascara stains, no tears, nothing. She'd planned this little welcome home surprise. Should have stuck to sitcoms, I muttered to myself. Less drama. The bedroom looked like a magazine spread, everything perfectly arranged, except for the elephant-sized betrayal sitting in my palm. Our wedding photo smiled at me from the dresser, all teeth and lies. 10 years of marriage, and this is how she tells me it's over? With a used rubber and a note that wouldn't pass muster in a high school creative writing class. I stumbled to the kitchen, my mind reeling. The coffee maker blinked 3:17 a.m. in accusatory red digits. Outside, our neighbor Stanley's porch light flickered on. The man had radar for drama, probably sensed the marital implosion from 3 houses away. My hands shook as I poured whiskey into a coffee mug. The good stuff, the bottle Lila bought me for my birthday with the inscription, "To my leading man." The irony wasn't lost on me. Apparently, I'd been demoted to supporting cast in my own marriage. The house felt different now, like a movie set after the cameras stopped rolling. All facade, no substance. I wandered through rooms that suddenly felt foreign, looking for clues I'd been too stupid or too trusting to notice before. In Lila's home office, her PR kingdom where she spun corporate lies for a living. I found her laptop open, password protected naturally. But Lila wasn't as clever as she thought. Her password was still Jack My Love 123. The woman who just handed me a rubber like a business card hadn't bothered to change her password. Her email was a goldmine of betrayal. Messages to her sister. Jack's so clueless, it's almost sad. Text to her best friend Megan. The Zex is amazing. Finally found a real man. And then the smoking tool. A thread with someone named Derek Monroe. Derek. Even his name sounded like a cologne advertisement. The messages went back months. Detailed accounts of their encounters, plans for weekends when I was supposedly on the road for comedy gigs that barely paid gas money. They'd been laughing at me, the has-been actor too pathetic to see his wife's Oscar-worthy performance as the faithful spouse. One message made my blood freeze. Jack's getting suspicious. Time for the nuclear option. Leave him the gift we discussed. Make it hurt. The gift, the rubber. This wasn't passion or impulse. It was calculated cruelty. Designed for maximum humiliation. They'd probably laughed about it afterward, imaging my face when I found their little present. I scrolled deeper, finding Derek's address, his LinkedIn profile boasting about his tech startup, his Instagram full of gym selfies and motivational quotes about winning at life. He looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for smug tech bro number 3. Square jaw, perfect teeth, the kind of guy who'd steal your wife and then post about it on social media. But the real knife twist came in Lila's messages to her mother. Jack's career is over. Derek has real money, real prospects. I deserve better than a washed-up actor who tells jokes to truckers on AM radio. I deserve better. 10 years of marriage, and I deserved better. I'd supported her through graduate school, celebrated every promotion, held her hair back during food poisoning, and I deserved better. My phone buzzed. A text from Lila. Hope you found my note. We need to talk tomorrow. I'm staying at Megan's tonight. Sure she was. Probably wrapped around Derek right now, celebrating their successful psychological warfare campaign. I stared at that text for a long moment, then scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Tony Russo, my old stunt double from the show, the only guy in this town who'd known me before I became a local radio personality / public disappointment. The phone rang 3 times before Tony's gravelly voice answered. Jack? Jesus, it's 3:30 in the morning. Someone better be dead. Not yet, I said. surprised by how calm I sounded. But I need you tonight. Bring the crowbar. The crowbar? Jack, what the hell? Not for her, I interrupted. For his car. Silence on the other end. Then, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and walked to my bedroom window, looking out at the quiet suburban street where nothing exciting ever happened. Stanley's light was still on. The man probably had his ear pressed to a glass against our shared wall. Well, Stanley was about to get the show of his lifetime. I opened my closet and pulled out the black clothes I wore for the occasional local theater gig, dinner theater Shakespeare for audiences who confused Hamlet with an omelet. Tonight, they'd serve a different purpose. As I changed clothes, I caught my reflection in the mirror. 43 years old, graying at the temples, laugh lines that had earned their keep back when I had something to laugh about. Not leading man material anymore, but not ready for the scrap heap either. Lila wanted drama. She was about to get a masterclass from a professional. 20 minutes later, Tony's pickup truck rumbled into my driveway. He eliminated the engine and stepped out, looking like a cross between a bouncer and a philosophy professor. 6'2", built like a brick wall, but with eyes that missed nothing. "So," he said, hefting a crowbar from his truck bed, "we're finally doing this?" Doing what? The thing we should have done in high school when Billy Kowalski stole your girlfriend. The thing we should have done when that director screwed you out of the movie role. The thing we should have done every time someone treated you like garbage because you're too nice to fight back. I looked at my oldest friend, this man who'd literally taken punches for me when the cameras rolled, and felt something shift inside me. For years, I'd been the good guy, the understanding husband, the professional who took rejection with a smile and a self-deprecating joke. Tonight, the good guy was off duty. "His address is 412 Harbor View," I said, climbing into the passenger seat. "And Tony?" "Yeah. This time, we don't pull our punches." As we drove through the empty streets toward Derek Monroe's upscale condo, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The thrill of being the protagonist in my own story instead of the comic relief in someone else's. Behind us, Stanley's porch light finally went dark. The show was just getting started. Derek Monroe lived in Harborview Towers, the kind of glass and steel monument to success that screamed, "I peaked in business school." His Tesla Model S sat in the underground garage like a smug electric middle finger to everyone who drove cars with actual engines. "Nice ride," Tony muttered, running his hand along the pristine paint job. Be a shame if something happened to it. The garage was empty except for Derek's automotive ego trip and a few other luxury vehicles belonging to people who probably used disruption as a verb. Security cameras dotted the corners, but Tony had thought ahead. Ski masks and a route that kept us in the blind spots. "You sure about this?" Tony asked, pulling out his phone to record our handiwork. "Once we cross this line, there's no going back to being the nice guy." I thought about Lila's note, about months of secret messages, about Derek's Instagram post from last week. Sometimes you have to take what you want. #no apologies, #winner mindset. "The nice guy is what got me into this mess," I said, taking the crowbar from Tony's hands. We worked with the efficiency of a pit crew. All 4 tires, not slashed, just deflated with strategically placed screws that would cause slow leaks. The trunk got a special surprise. 3 pounds of fish guts from Tony's weekend fishing trip, sealed in bags that would eventually break down in the heat. Super glue in the door locks because nothing says good morning like being trapped outside your own car. The pièce de résistance was Tony's idea. A business card from the Riverside STD clinic tucked under the windshield wiper with a handwritten note. "Your test results are in. Please call immediately." "Think he'll buy it?" Tony asked, admiring our work. "Guy like Derek? His ego's too big to consider he might be clean. He'll spend the whole day wondering which conquest gave him the gift that keeps on giving." We were back in Tony's truck by 4:30, adrenaline coursing through my veins like I'd just finished a live television performance. For the first time in months, I felt alive. "Where to now?" Tony asked. "Murphy's Tavern. I need to have a conversation with Megan." Murphy's was the kind of dive bar that opened early for the shift workers and stayed open late for the people who had nowhere else to go. At 5 a.m., it was populated by insomniacs, third-shift workers, and the occasional cheating wife's best friend who thought she was clever. Megan sat at the far end of the bar, nursing a cosmopolitan like she was at some upscale Manhattan lounge instead of a place where the house wine came with a warning label. She looked up when I walked in, her face cycling through surprise, guilt, and poorly concealed panic. "Jack, I didn't expect to see you here. Lila said you were out of town." I slid onto the bar stool next to her. Funny thing about lies, Megan. They're only as good as the people keeping them. The bartender, a woman named Gwen, who'd been serving drinks and collecting secrets in this place for 20 years, raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Gwen had the kind of face that invited confessions and the discretion to forget them when the price was right. I don't know what you're talking about, Megan said, but her hand shook as she lifted her drink. Derek Monroe. Ring a bell? About 6'1", drives a Tesla, thinks he's God's gift to womankind? The guy who's been screwing my wife while you provided alibis? Megan's cosmopolitan ended up on the bar instead of in her mouth. Jack, I never meant... Save it. I signaled Gwen for a whiskey. I'm not here to make you feel guilty. Guilt's for people with consciences. I'm here to give you a message for Lila. What message? I leaned closer, close enough to smell her overpriced perfume and underlying desperation. Tell her I hope her yoga mat's flame retardant. She's going to need it. Megan's face went white. What does that mean? She'll figure it out. I knocked back my whiskey and stood up. Oh, and Megan, next time you want to help someone destroy a marriage, make sure you're not doing it in a town where everybody knows everybody. Gwen here has been watching you meet with Derek every Tuesday for the past month. Haven't you, Gwen? Gwen polished a glass with studied neutrality. I see a lot of things. Remember even more when people are nice to me? I dropped a 20 on the bar, for the whiskey and the conversation. As I walked toward the door, Gwen called after me. Jack, you might want to know. Derek's planning something for tonight, some kind of live podcast thing. Been bragging about it all week. I turned back. What kind of podcast? The kind where he tells the world about his conquests. Names, details, everything. Says it's going to make him famous. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. A tell-all podcast. Derek wasn't content with stealing my wife. He wanted to humiliate me publicly, turn my private pain into his public entertainment. What time? I asked. 8 p.m., broadcasting from the community college radio station. I looked at Gwen's weathered face, seeing something like sympathy in her eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because 20 years ago, my husband ran off with his secretary. Left me with 2 kids and a mortgage. Never got my chance to even the score. She set down the glass she'd been polishing. Consider this my vicarious revenge. Outside Murphy's, Tony was waiting in his truck, engine running. So, how'd it go with the yoga princess? Change of plans, I said, climbing into the passenger seat. We're going to crash a podcast. The community college radio station was a joke. 2 rooms in the basement of the communications building, equipment that belonged in a museum, and soundproofing that wouldn't stop a whisper. But it had something Derek needed. A live streaming setup and the legitimacy of an actual broadcast facility. At 7:30, we watched Derek arrive with his entourage, Alexis, his wannabe filmmaker friend with a camera, and 2 other tech bros who looked like they'd stepped out of a startup commercial. They were laughing, probably already celebrating their upcoming character assassination. How do we get in? Tony asked. I smiled, pulling out my wallet and extracting a card I hadn't used in months. Faculty parking pass. I did a guest lecture here last semester on media and performance. Turns out, once you're in the system, you're in the system. The building was nearly empty. Just a few night classes, and a janitor who nodded at us like we belonged there. We made our way to the radio station where Derek's voice was already echoing through the thin walls. And that's when I realized this guy's wife was basically throwing herself at me. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Say no? Laughter from his audience. My hands clenched into fists. The best part is he has no idea. Guy's completely clueless. Still thinks he's some kind of celebrity because he was on TV 15 years ago. It's almost sad, really. More laughter. Through the small window, I could see Derek holding court, Alexis recording everything, the other guys hanging on every word of his conquest story. So there I am, in their bed, his bed, and she's telling me how much better I am than her husband, how he can't satisfy her, how he's a failure as a man, as a provider, as everything. And I'm thinking, this is too easy, like almost boring easy. That's when I stopped being angry and started being tactical. Derek wanted to perform? I'd give him a performance he'd never forget. The radio station had a secondary entrance, a fire door that led directly into the broadcast booth. The lock was older than Derek's entire career, and Tony had it open in 30 seconds. The funniest part is, she left him a little present tonight, a used rubber with a note. Can you imagine his face when he found it? I stepped into the booth, and Derek's voice died mid-sentence. His face went through the same cycle as Megan's. Surprise, recognition, panic. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, stepping up to the microphone. Jack Kingsley here, and I'd like to correct a few inaccuracies in tonight's broadcast. Derek lunged for the microphone, but Tony materialized behind him like a brick wall with arms. Sit down, tech boy. The grown-ups are talking. You can't this is my show, Derek sputtered. Actually, it's a public access station funded by taxpayer dollars, which means I have as much right to be here as you do. I adjusted the microphone and looked directly into Alexis's camera. Hi, folks. For those just tuning in, I'm the clueless husband Derek's been telling you about. And boy, do I have some stories to share. Derek's face went pale. You're making a mistake, Jack. This is being streamed live. Thousands of people are watching. I'm counting on it. I smiled at the camera. See, Derek here thinks he's pretty clever, thinks he pulled one over on the dumb actor. But here's the thing about actors. We're really good at research. And Derek? Well, Derek's got some interesting secrets of his own. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the screenshots I'd taken from Derek's social media accounts, his LinkedIn, his company's financial records that were part of public filings. For instance, did you know Derek's startup is 3 months behind on rent? Or that his Tesla is leased, not owned? Or that he's been using investor money to fund his lifestyle while his company burns through cash like a cocaine habit? Derek tried to stand up, but Tony's hand on his shoulder kept him firmly planted. That's confidential information. It's public record, genius. You just have to know where to look. I leaned into the microphone. But here's my favorite part. Derek's been telling everyone he's some kind of sexual conquistador, right? Well, I did a little digging into his dating history. Turns out our boy Derek has a very specific type. Married women with successful husbands. The chat feed on the streaming platform was going crazy. Viewer numbers were climbing by the hundreds. See, Derek doesn't actually want these women. He wants what their husbands have: success, stability, respect. Things you can't buy with daddy's money or fake with motivational Instagram posts. So he targets wives who are going through rough patches, makes them feel special, then uses them to tear down men who've actually accomplished something. Derek's face was red now, sweat beading on his forehead. You're lying. You're just bitter because what? Because my wife chose you? I laughed, and it felt genuine. Derek, my wife didn't choose you. She chose revenge. Against me, against herself, against the life we built. You were just the weapon she picked up. And honestly, she could have done better. The room went silent except for the hum of the broadcasting equipment. Even Alexis had stopped recording, her camera hanging loose in her hands. But here's what really gets me, I continued, my voice dropping to the intimate tone I used for late-night radio. You thought this was about winning. Thought you were the alpha male, the guy who gets the girl and the glory. But you're not the hero of this story, Derek. You're not even the villain. You're just the other man in a bad marriage, the most pathetic character of all. I stood up, looking directly at Derek. My wife wanted to hurt me, and she used you to do it. But the thing is, Derek, when this is all over, when the drama dies down and the excitement wears off, you'll still be you. A trust fund baby with a failing company and a personality disorder, and I'll still be me. A guy who survived Hollywood, network television, and now this. Which one of us do you think is really winning? The streaming platform showed over 2,000 viewers now. The chat was a blur of comments, reactions, people taking sides. Oh, and one more thing, I said, turning back to the microphone. Derek, you might want to check your car when you get home tonight. And maybe call your doctor. You know, just to be safe. I walked out of the booth, Tony following behind me. Derek sat frozen in his chair, his grand podcast turned into his public humiliation. As we reached the hallway, I could hear him trying to salvage the situation. That guy's obviously unstable. Probably dangerous. You can't believe anything he says. But the damage was done. By morning, clips from the podcast would be all over social media. Derek Monroe, the conquering tech bro, reduced to a sweating, stammering mess by a washed-up actor with a radio show. Feel better? Tony asked as we walked to his truck. Getting there, I said. But we're not done yet. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. What the hell did you do? Derek's all over the internet. People are calling me at work. Fix this now. I typed back. Just getting started, sweetheart. Hope you're ready for Act 2. The night was still young, and I had a marriage to finish burying. By 6 a.m., I was trending on 3 different social media platforms. Jack Kingsley Revenge was climbing the charts faster than a pop song about heartbreak, and the clips from Derek's podcast disaster had been viewed over 50,000 times. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Local reporters, podcasters, even a producer from a morning talk show in Boston. Apparently, public marital destruction was good for ratings. But the call that mattered came from Detective Linda Marsh, my old friend from high school, who'd chosen law enforcement over show business, a decision that looked smarter every day. "Jack, what the hell are you doing?" Linda's voice carried the authority of 15 years wearing a badge. "I've got 3 complaints filed against you already this morning." "3? I'm disappointed. I was aiming for at least 5. This isn't funny. Derek Monroe says you broke into the radio station. His friend Alexis claims you threatened them, and your wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, says you're stalking her. You want to tell me your side before this gets out of hand?" I was sitting in my kitchen watching the sunrise through windows that had framed 10 years of married mornings. The house felt different now. Not like home, but like a movie set waiting to be struck. "Linda, did you watch the podcast?" "About half the department watched the podcast. That's not the point. Derek Monroe has been conducting a months-long affair with my wife, documenting it on social media and planning to broadcast intimate details about our marriage for his entertainment. When exactly did defending yourself become illegal?" Silence on the other end. Then, "The radio station thing. Did you break in?" "I used my faculty parking pass and entered through an unlocked door into a public facility during operating hours. If that's breaking and entering, half the community college is guilty." "And the threats?" "I told him to check his car and call his doctor. Given his lifestyle choices, that sounds like health advice to me." Another pause. "Jack, I can't protect you if you do something stupid. These people are looking for a reason to paint you as the unstable ex-husband. Don't give them ammunition." "Noted. Anything else?" "Yeah, off the record, Derek Monroe's been on our radar for a while. Financial irregularities, complaints from former business partners, a few maltreatment reports that never went anywhere. If he's stupid enough to keep pushing this, he might not like what we find." After Linda hung up, I poured coffee and scrolled through the social media aftermath. The internet had divided into camps: Team Jack, the wronged husband fighting back, and Team Derek, the successful entrepreneur being maltreated by a jealous has-been. But the comments section told a different story. Women sharing their own cheating husband stories. Men talking about being publicly humiliated by ex-wives. People who'd been betrayed by friends, family, business partners. I'd accidentally tapped into something bigger than my personal drama. A collective rage against being treated like garbage by people who thought they were untouchable. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Saw the podcast. "Derek's company owes my construction firm 40 grand. Anything I can do to help?" Another. "Jack, this is Sarah from high school. Derek hit on me at my husband's funeral last year. Keep fighting." And another. "Local reporter here. Have info about Derek you might find interesting." Coffee? I was becoming the center of something I hadn't planned. A movement of people who were tired of being stepped on by entitled narcissists who treated other people's lives like their personal entertainment. But before I could process that fully, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Lila standing on my front porch looking like she'd slept in her car. Her perfect PR executive facade was cracked. Makeup smudged, hair disheveled, designer clothes wrinkled. I opened the door. Well, well, the grieving widow returns to the scene of the crime. "We need to talk." Her voice was hoarse, probably from screaming at Derek all night. "Now you want to talk? Funny, I thought we covered everything in your note. Very eloquent, by the way. Really captured the essence of our marriage." She pushed past me into the house. Our house, the one we'd renovated together, where we'd planned to grow old and die in matching recliners. "You humiliated me, Jack. My boss is asking questions. My clients are canceling meetings. People are staring at me like I'm some kind of monster. Weird how that works, isn't it? Actions having consequences, almost like the universe has a sense of justice." Lila spun around, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married. Beautiful, passionate, alive with fury. "You think this is justice? Destroying my career because your feelings got hurt?" "My feelings got hurt?" I laughed, and it came out harder than I intended. "Lila, you handed me a used rubber like a business card. You let your boyfriend broadcast intimate details about our marriage to strangers. You planned this whole thing to cause maximum psychological damage, and you think I'm the one who went too far? That was different. That was between us. No, that was between you, me, and Derek's internet audience. You made our private business public the moment you decided to become content for his little show." She sat down on our couch, the one we'd picked out together at 3 different furniture stores because she couldn't decide between beige and taupe. Now it looked like evidence from a crime scene. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said. and for a second she sounded like the woman who used to laugh at my jokes. What did you mean, Lila? When you started sleeping with Derek, what was the end game when you left me that note? What did you think would happen? That I'd quietly disappear? Thank you for the privilege of being betrayed? I thought you'd be angry. Maybe we'd have a fight, get divorced, move on with our lives. Move on to what? Derek's trust fund and startup fantasies? You think he's going to marry you after this circus? Her face went pale. He loves me. Derek loves the idea of you. The trophy wife, the successful woman who chose him over her accomplished husband. But love? Lila, the man broadcast details about your sex life to strangers for entertainment. If that's love, you need therapy, not a divorce lawyer. I sat down across from her, studying the woman I'd shared a bed with for 10 years. She looked smaller now, diminished by the consequences of her choices. What do you want from me? She asked. I want you to understand what you've done. Not just to me, but to yourself. You had a life, Lila, a good life. Maybe not perfect, maybe not exciting enough for your taste, but real, and you threw it away for what? Instagram photos with a guy who sees you as a conquest? You don't understand. You've been checked out for years. The failed comeback attempts, the radio job that's going nowhere, the way you just accepted mediocrity. I needed something more. So you decided to destroy everything instead of talking to me about it. Would you have listened? Really listened? Not just made jokes and changed the subject? The question hit harder than I expected because she wasn't entirely wrong. I had been going through the motions, treating our marriage like a comfortable old sweater instead of something that needed attention and care. Maybe not, I admitted. But that doesn't justify what you did. There were 1,000 ways to handle this that didn't involve public humiliation and psychological warfare. And there were 1,000 ways for you to handle last night that didn't involve destroying Derek's reputation and mine. True, I could have hired a lawyer, filed for divorce, split our assets 50-50, and moved on like a civilized adult. I leaned forward. But where's the fun in that? Her eyes widened. What does that mean? It means, my dear wife, that you wanted drama. You wanted excitement. You wanted to see what would happen if you pushed the nice guy too far. I stood up. Congratulations. You're about to find out. My phone rang before she could respond. The caller ID showed the local radio station. Jack Kingsley. Jack, it's Mike from the station. We've been getting calls all morning about your podcast appearance. People want to hear more. How would you feel about doing a special show tonight? Your side of the story? Unfiltered? I looked at Lila, who was staring at me with growing alarm. What kind of show? Call-in format. Let people share their own stories about betrayal, revenge, fighting back against people who think they can walk all over you. We're thinking The Last Stand or something like that. I like it. What time? 7 p.m. 2-hour slot, live broadcast, streaming online. We'll promote it all day. Perfect. I'll be there. I hung up and smiled at Lila. Looks like I'm back in show business. Jack, please, this has gone far enough. Derek's already talking about suing you for defamation. If you keep pushing, he'll what? Sue me for telling the truth? Bring it on. Discovery is going to be a real witch for Derek when we start subpoenaing his financial records, his text messages, his dating history. She stood up, smoothing her wrinkled skirt like she was trying to hold herself together. I'm going to stay at my sister's for a while, until this blows over. Good idea, but Lila, it's not going to blow over. This is just getting started. After she left, I called Tony. How do you feel about being a radio co-host? Depends. Are we going to get sued? Probably, but we're going to have a hell of a lot of fun first. I'm in. What do you need? Research. Derek's business, his dating history, his social media presence, everything. If we're going to war, I want to know exactly who we're fighting. Consider it done. What about Lila? I looked around the empty house, at the wedding photos and shared memories that now felt like evidence from someone else's life. Lila made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. As Tony hung up, my phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number. Jack, this is Alexis, Derek's friend from last night. We need to talk. I have something you need to see. I stared at the message, wondering what Derek's filmmaker friend could possibly want to tell me. Then I typed back, Murphy's Tavern, 1 hour. The game was changing, and I was finally ready to play. Alexis looked nothing like I expected. Instead of the hipster filmmaker stereotype, she was mid-30s, professionally dressed, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made me understand why she'd been documenting Derek's exploits. She slid into the booth across from me at Murphy's, clutching a laptop bag like it contained nuclear secrets. "You're not what I expected either," she said, studying my face. "Derek painted you as this pathetic loser, but you handled yourself pretty well last night." "Thanks, I think. What did you want to show me?" Alexis opened her laptop and angled the screen toward me. "I've been filming Derek for 3 months. Started as a documentary about young entrepreneurs, but it turned into something else entirely. The video showed Derek in his condo, talking to someone off camera, probably Alexis. But his words made my blood run cold. The thing about married women is they're so grateful for attention. You make them feel special, tell them their husbands don't appreciate them, and they'll do anything. It's like emotional manipulation 101. Another clip, Derek laughing with his tech bro friends. "I've got this actor's wife completely hooked. Guy has no idea. The best part is she thinks I'm going to leave my comfortable life for her. As if," and then the smoking tool. Derek talking directly to the camera like he was recording a confessional. "Here's the plan. Lila's going to leave him the rubber with a note." Her idea, actually, which is perfect because it shows premeditation on her part. Then I do the podcast, tell everyone about the affair. Make him look like a clueless loser. His reputation gets destroyed, his radio career ends, and Lila comes running to me for comfort. Except by then, I'll be done with her. On to the next conquest. I stared at the screen, processing what I just heard. He planned the whole thing. Gets worse. Alexis clicked to another file. "This is from 2 weeks ago." Derek's voice again. "If the husband gets suspicious or tries to fight back, we'll claim he's unstable, maybe dangerous. Lila's already agreed to say he threatened her. With her PR background and my social media following, we can destroy his credibility completely, make him unemployable." Jesus Christ. There's more. Another clip. Derek and Lila together in his condo. "The beauty of this plan is that we're not just ending your marriage. We're ending him, his career, his reputation, his future. By the time we're done, Jack Kingsley will be a cautionary tale about what happens when you don't appreciate what you have." I sat back in the booth, my mind reeling. This wasn't an affair that got out of hand. It was a coordinated campaign of psychological destruction, planned and executed with the precision of a military operation. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Alexis closed the laptop. "Because Derek's a sociopath, and I was too caught up in the documentary to see it at first. But after last night, watching him panic when you turned the tables, I realized what I'd been documenting wasn't entrepreneurial ambition. It was huntery behavior." "What do you want in return?" "Permission to use everything in my film. Derek's manipulation, your revenge, the whole story. But I want to tell it truthfully. Show him for what he really is." I thought about it. A documentary that exposed Derek's methods could prevent him from doing this to other couples. Deal, but I want copies of everything. "Already burned to a flash drive." She slid a small device across the table. "Jack, there's something else. Derek's not done. He's planning something for tonight, some kind of public confrontation during your radio show." "What kind of confrontation?" "I don't know the details, but he's been making calls all day. Something about showing up with proof that you're unstable and dangerous." I pocketed the flash drive and stood up. "Let him come. I'll be ready." Back home, I spent the afternoon preparing for war. The flash drive contained hours of footage. Derek's manipulation tactics, his plans to destroy me, his casual cruelty toward Lila and other women. It was a masterclass in narcissistic misuse, documented by the perpetrator himself. But the most damaging clip was Derek talking to his father. Apparently, his trust fund was contingent on maintaining a respectable public image. If his sociopathic tendencies became public knowledge, Daddy's money would disappear. I called Linda Marsh. "I need to see you, officially." "What's wrong?" "I have evidence of a conspiracy to commit defamation, maltreatment, and possibly fraud. Can you meet me at the station?" An hour later, I sat in Linda's office, watching her review Alexis's footage. Her expression grew darker with each clip. "This is premeditated psychological misuse," she said finally. "The planning, the coordination, the intent to destroy your reputation and livelihood. We could probably make criminal charges stick. What would you recommend?" "Honestly, let us handle it. File a complaint, let the system work. Derek Monroe is about to have a very bad day." "And if I want to handle it myself," Linda leaned back in her chair, "then you didn't hear this from me. But if someone were to, hypothetically, use this evidence to defend themselves against false accusations, that would be within their legal rights. And if that same person were to, hypothetically, make this evidence public to protect other potential sufferers, that would be a public service. Hypothetically. Hypothetically. At 6 p.m., I arrived at the radio station to find a crowd gathering outside. Word about tonight's show had spread through social media, and people were actually showing up to watch a radio broadcast, something that hadn't happened since the 1940s. Tony was waiting in the parking lot with Gwen from Murphy's, and about 20 other people I recognized from around town. "What's all this?" I asked. "Your fan club," Gwen said. "Turns out a lot of people have been waiting for someone to stand up to entitled pricks like Derek Monroe. You're kind of a folk hero now." "Great. No pressure." Inside the station, Mike, the program director, was practically vibrating with excitement. "Jack, we've got over 500 people signed up for the online stream, and it doesn't start for an hour. This is the biggest audience we've ever had." I settled into the broadcast booth, testing the microphone and organizing my notes. The flash drive sat on the desk like a loaded weapon, waiting for the right moment. At exactly 7 p.m., Derek Monroe walked through the front door of the radio station with an entourage that looked like a corporate legal team. Lila was with them, wearing sunglasses indoors and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Showtime," I said into the microphone as the on-air light flickered on. "Good evening, folks. This is Jack Kingsley, and welcome to The Last Stand, a show about fighting back when people think they can walk all over you." The phone lines lit up immediately. Callers sharing stories of cheating spouses, backstabbing friends, employers who treated them like garbage. But I could see Derek through the booth window, pacing like a caged animal, waiting for his moment. "We've got a special guest tonight," I continued. "Derek Monroe, the tech entrepreneur who's been making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Derek, would you like to come in and share your side of the story?" Derek burst through the booth door like he'd been shot from a cannon. "You're damn right I want to share my side. This man is a stalker, a criminal, and a danger to the community." Strong words. Can you back them up? "I have witnesses. I have evidence. This man broke into private property, threatened me, and has been maltreating my girlfriend." "Your girlfriend being my wife?" "Your ex-wife. She's filing for divorce tomorrow, and she's going to tell the court exactly what kind of man you really are." I looked at Lila, who was standing in the doorway, looking like she wanted to disappear. "Is that true, Lila? Are you going to tell the court what kind of man I am?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, then looked at Derek for guidance. "She doesn't have to answer to you," Derek said. "You lost that right when you decided to become a stalker." Interesting word choice. I pulled out the flash drive. "Speaking of stalkers, I have some footage I think our audience would find educational." Derek's face went white. "You can't. That's private?" "Actually, it's evidence of criminal conspiracy, which makes it very much public interest." I plugged the drive into the computer. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present Derek Monroe in his own words." The first clip played through the radio station speakers and streamed live to hundreds of online viewers. Derek's voice, clear and unmistakable, explaining his plan to manipulate married women for sport. That's taken out of context," Derek stammered. "Really? Let's try this one." The second clip played, Derek laughing about destroying my reputation and career. By the third clip, Derek calling Lila a useful idiot who would be discarded once he was done with her, Lila had removed her sunglasses and I could see tears streaming down her face. "Turn it off," Derek demanded. "This is illegal. I'm calling my lawyer." "Please do. I'm sure he'll love representing a client whose criminal conspiracy is documented in high-definition video." Derek lunged for the computer, but Tony materialized in the doorway like an avenging angel. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. This is maltreatment. This is justice," I said into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard a master class in psychological misuse. Derek Monroe doesn't just cheat with married women, he systematically destroys their lives and their husbands' lives for entertainment." The phone lines were going crazy. The online chat was a blur of outrage and support. And Derek Monroe, the confident tech entrepreneur who thought he could destroy people for fun, was having a complete meltdown on live radio. "You want to know what kind of man I am?" I asked, looking directly at Derek. "I'm the kind of man who fights back when someone tries to destroy his life. I'm the kind of man who protects other people from hunters. And I'm the kind of man who doesn't let bullies win." Derek was backing toward the door now, his legal team already heading for the exits. "This isn't over," he said. "You're right," I replied. It's not, because tomorrow morning, copies of this footage are going to every local news station, every social media platform, and your father's law firm. How do you think Daddy's going to feel when he finds out his trust fund baby is a documented sociopath? Derek's face went from white to green. He turned and ran. Lila stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix what you've done." She nodded and followed Derek out the door. The show continued for another hour, with callers sharing their own stories of fighting back against bullies and misusers. But the real victory was watching Derek Monroe, the man who thought he could destroy people for entertainment, run away like the coward he'd always been. As I signed off, I looked through the booth window at the crowd of supporters still gathered outside. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the sufferer of someone else's cruelty, but the protagonist of my own story. The war wasn't over yet, but the battle was definitely won. The next morning brought consequences like a biblical flood. Derek's trust fund was frozen pending a character investigation. His startup lost 3 major investors before noon. The local news had picked up the story, and by evening it had gone national. Tech Bro's sociopathic scheme exposed by washed-up actor's brilliant revenge. I was having coffee in my kitchen when Linda Marsh called. "Jack, you need to see the news." I turned on the television to find Derek Monroe doing a perp walk outside his condo building. Not arrested, just fleeing town with whatever belongings he could fit in a suitcase. "What happened?" "Turns out your friend Derek had warrants in 2 other states. Similar schemes, different sufferers. The FBI's been looking for him for 8 months. You're kidding. Fraud, identity theft, stalking. This guy's been running the same con for years. Target successful married couples, seduce the wife, destroy the husband, then disappear when things get too hot. You just happen to be the first sufferer who fought back effectively." I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. "So Lila wasn't his first?" "Not even close. We found evidence of at least 6 other couples over the past 3 years. Always the same pattern. Psychological manipulation, public humiliation, financial destruction. You exposing him probably saved a dozen other marriages." After Linda hung up, I sat in my empty house processing the magnitude of what had happened. Lila hadn't just cheated on me. She'd been the sufferer of a professional con artist who specialized in destroying families for profit. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained it. My phone rang. Lila's number. "I saw the news," she said without preamble. "Where are you?" "My sister's. Jack, I need you to know I never meant for it to go this far. He told me you didn't love me anymore, that you were planning to leave me anyway. He said he was protecting me from being abandoned." Classic manipulation. Make the sufferer think they're being rescued instead of exploited. I know that now, but at the time, it felt real. He felt real. I looked around the kitchen, where we'd shared 10 years of morning coffee, evening wine, and the comfortable silence of people who knew each other completely. "What do you want, Lila?" "I want to come home. I want to try to fix this." "It's too late for that." "Is it?" "We were good together, Jack. Before Derek, before everything fell apart, we were happy. Can't we try to get back to that?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. The woman I'd married was still in there somewhere, underneath the damage Derek had inflicted. Maybe we could rebuild. Maybe love was stronger than betrayal. Then I remembered the rubber in my hand, the note on the nightstand, the months of lies and manipulation, the planning, the cruelty, the way she looked at me like I was pathetic for not seeing what was happening. "No," I said. "We can't." "Jack, please." "Lila, you didn't just cheat on me. You participated in a plan to destroy my life for someone else's entertainment. You were going to claim I threatened you. You were going to help him ruin my career, my reputation, my future. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." Silence on the other end. "Derek may have manipulated you into the affair, but nobody forced you to be cruel about it. Nobody made you leave me that note. Nobody made you agree to help destroy me. You did that because some part of you wanted to." "That's not true, isn't it? You said I'd been checked out for years. Maybe you're right. Maybe I wasn't the husband you needed. But instead of talking to me about it, instead of trying to fix our marriage or asking for a divorce, you chose to burn everything down and dance in the ashes." More silence. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, I continued. You can have the house, half the assets, whatever you want, but I'm done with the marriage, with the drama, with pretending that love is enough to overcome deliberate cruelty. So that's it? 10 years, and you're just walking away? No, Lila. You walked away 10 years ago. I'm just finally accepting it. I hung up and sat in the silence of my empty house. Outside, Stanley was mowing his lawn, probably disappointed that the show was over, but it wasn't over. Not quite yet. That evening, Murphy's Tavern threw an impromptu celebration. Half the town showed up to toast the local hero who'd taken down the big bad tech bro. Gwen kept the drinks flowing. Tony told increasingly embellished versions of our midnight car vandalism, and I found myself holding court like the protagonist I'd always wanted to be. Speech, someone called out. Speech, speech. I stood up, looking around at the faces of people who'd watched me fall from minor celebrity to local radio host to loser to folk hero in the span of a week. I'm not good at speeches, I said. I'm better at dialogue. So let me just say this. Sometimes life casts you as the sufferer. Sometimes you're the comic relief. Sometimes you're that guy who gets the girl, and sometimes you're the guy who loses everything. The bar went quiet. But every once in a while, if you're lucky and you're smart and you're just pissed off enough, you get to be the guy who fights back. The guy who says, no more. The guy who refuses to let the bullies win. Cheers erupted around the room. Derek Monroe thought he could destroy my life for entertainment. He thought I'd roll over and take it because that's what nice guys do. Well, Derek learned something this week. Nice guys finish last, but mean guys don't always finish at all. More cheers. So here's to fighting back. Here's to standing up for yourself. And here's to all the Derek Monroes of the world learning that actions have consequences. I raised my glass. To the last stand. To the last stand. The crowd roared back. As the celebration continued around me, I stepped outside for some air. The Massachusetts night was cool and clear, full of possibilities I hadn't seen in years. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Jack, this is Rebecca from Channel 7 News. We'd like to offer you a weekly segment, Fighting Back with Jack Kingsley. Interested? Another text. Jack, this is David from Beacon Publishing. We want to discuss a book deal about your experience. When can we talk? And another. Mr. Kingsley, this is Sarah from the William Morris Agency. We represent several podcasters who are interested in your story. Please call. I stared at the messages, realizing that my personal catastrophe had somehow become my professional resurrection. The washed-up actor was suddenly in demand again, not for his past success, but for his present courage. Inside Murphy's, the celebration was reaching epic proportions. Someone had connected their phone to the sound system and was playing clips from Derek's confession videos. The crowd was laughing and cheering at each revelation of his sociopathic behavior. Tony appeared beside me with 2 beers. So what's next? I don't know. For the first time in years, I really don't know. That's not necessarily a bad thing. No, I agreed. It's not. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching through the window as our friends and neighbors celebrated the downfall of a man who'd thought he could destroy people for sport. Hey, Jack? Yeah? You know that thing you said about nice guys finishing last? What about it? Tony grinned. I think you proved that wrong. Nice guys don't finish last. They just finish differently. I looked at my oldest friend, this man who'd helped me vandalize a car and crash a podcast and document the downfall of a sociopath, and I realized he was right. I wasn't the same nice guy who'd found a rubber in his bed a week ago. I was something new, someone who'd learned that kindness and strength weren't mutually exclusive, that you could be decent without being a doormat, that sometimes the best revenge was simply refusing to be a sufferer. Derek Monroe was gone, probably running another con in another city. Lila was filing for divorce and trying to rebuild a life she'd helped destroy, and I was standing outside a dive bar in small-town Massachusetts, fielding offers from publishers and television producers who wanted to hear my story. It wasn't the ending I'd planned when this all started. It was better. Inside Murphy's, someone started a chant. Jack, Jack, Jack. I finished my beer, straightened my shoulders, and walked back into my celebration. After all, the show must go on, and for the first time in years, I was ready for my close-up. # epilogue 6 months later. The book tour was winding down, and I was back in Massachusetts for the final reading. The Last Stand, How I Fought Back and Won had spent 12 weeks on the bestseller list, spawned a Netflix documentary deal, and launched a weekly podcast that was downloaded by millions. Derek Monroe had been arrested in Florida, running the same con on a retired couple in Miami. He was currently awaiting trial on federal fraud charges. His trust fund had been permanently revoked, and his father had publicly disowned him in a statement that became its own viral moment. Lila had moved to California, where she was working for a nonprofit that helped sufferers of domestic misuse. We'd spoken once since the divorce was finalized, a brief civil conversation where she thanked me for exposing Derek before he could destroy more families. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was closure. The reading was at the same community college where Derek had planned his tell-all podcast. The auditorium was packed, and the Quanda session had run long because people kept sharing their own stories of fighting back against bullies, misusers, and narcissists. "Last question," I said, pointing to a young woman in the front row. "Mr. Kingsley, do you ever regret how you handled the situation? Do you think you went too far?" I thought about it, really thought about it. The question had been asked dozens of times during the tour, and my answer had evolved. "I think about that a lot," I said finally. "And here's what I've concluded. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that Derek Monroe was the kind of person who destroyed families for entertainment. I regret that my wife was vulnerable to his manipulation. I regret that our marriage ended the way it did." The auditorium was silent. But do I regret fighting back? Do I regret refusing to be a sufferer? Do I regret exposing a hunter who was hurting other people? No, I don't regret that at all. Applause filled the room. The thing about bullies is that they count on their sufferers being too polite, too scared, or too broken to fight back. They count on us being nice while they destroy our lives. Well, sometimes nice isn't enough. Sometimes you have to be willing to get your hands dirty to protect yourself and the people you care about. More applause. But here's the important part. Fighting back doesn't mean becoming them. It means refusing to let them win. It means standing up for yourself without losing your humanity. It means being strong enough to say no more and smart enough to do it legally. After the reading, I signed books and shook hands and listened to stories from people who'd found the courage to stand up to their own Derek Monroes. A woman who'd exposed her embezzling business partner. A man who'd fought back against a stalker ex-girlfriend. A teenager who'd recorded his bullies and gotten them expelled. Each story was different, but they all had the same theme. Ordinary people finding extraordinary courage when pushed too far. As the crowd thinned out, I noticed a familiar figure waiting by the exit. Tony Russo, wearing a suit that probably cost more than his truck. "Look at you, all fancy," I said. "Look at you, best-selling author. Who would have thought?" We walked out to the parking lot together, past the spot where Derek's Tesla used to sit before we filled it with fish guts and deflated its tires. "So what's next?" Tony asked. "Movie deal? Television series? Presidential campaign?" "Funny you should ask." I pulled out my phone and showed him the email I'd received that morning. "Netflix wants to turn the book into a limited series. They're asking if I want to play myself. The washed-up actor becomes the comeback king. I love it. There's just one problem. They want to cast someone to play you. Interested in being a consultant?" Tony grinned. "As long as they get someone handsome to play me." We stood there in the parking lot where this whole adventure had begun. Two middle-aged guys who'd learned that it's never too late to be the hero of your own story. "You know what the best part is?" I said. "What?" "Derek thought he was writing our story, thought he was the director, the producer, the star, thought we were just supporting characters in his narrative. And instead, he became a cautionary tale in ours." Tony laughed. "Poetic justice, the best kind." As we walked to our cars, I felt my phone buzz with a text message. For a split second, my heart jumped. Old habits die hard. But it wasn't Lila or Derek or another crisis demanding my attention. It was from my literary agent. "Jack, just got off the phone with Hollywood. They want to option your story for a major motion picture. Are you ready to be a movie star again?" I looked up at the Massachusetts sky, clear and full of stars I'd forgotten to notice during the dark months of my marriage's collapse. Then I typed back, "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Because that was the real lesson of the last year. Not that revenge was sweet or that justice always prevailed, but that you never knew what you were capable of until someone pushed you far enough to find out. Derek Monroe had tried to destroy my life, and instead, he'd given me a better one. He'd wanted to make me the villain in his story, and instead, I'd become the hero in my own. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to fight back against people who think they can walk all over you, you discover that you're stronger than you ever imagined. I got in my car and drove home through the quiet streets of the town that had watched me fall and helped me rise again. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chapters in a story I was finally writing for myself. But tonight, I was just Jack Kingsley, former sitcom star, current best-selling author, and the man who'd learned that sometimes the last stand is really the first step toward something better.